On Rye, Chapter 19. The fifth grade was a little better. The other students seemed less hostile, and I was growing larger physically. I still wasn't chosen for the homeroom teams, but I was threatened less. David and his violin had gone away. The family had moved. I walked home alone, often trailed by one or two guys, of whom Juan was the worst. But they didn't start anything. Juan smoked cigarettes. He walked behind me smoking a cigarette, and he always had a different buddy with him. He never followed me alone. It scared me. I wished they'd go away. Yet another way, I didn't care. I didn't like Juan. I didn't like anybody in that school. I think they knew that. I think that's why they disliked me. I didn't like the way they walked or looked or talked, and I didn't like my father or mother either. I still had the feeling of being surrounded by white empty space. There was always a slight nausea in my stomach. Juan was dark-skinned and he wore a brass chain instead of a belt. The girls were afraid of him, and the boys, too. He and one of his buddies followed me home almost every day. I'd walk into the house and they'd stand outside. Juan would smoke his cigarette, looking tough, and his buddy would stand there. I'd watch them through the curtain. Finally, they would walk off. Mrs. Frittag was our English teacher. The first day in class, she asked each of us our names. "I want to get to know all of you," she said. She smiled. "Now, each of you has a father, I'm sure. I think it'd be interesting if we found out that each of your father does for a living. We'll start with seat number 1 and we go around the class. Now, Marie, what does your father do for a living?" "He's a gardener." "Ah, that's nice. Seat number 2. Andrew, what does your father do?" It was terrible. All the fathers in my immediate neighborhood had lost their jobs. My father had lost his job. Jean's father sat on his front porch all day. All the fathers were without jobs, except for Chuck's, who worked in a meat plant. He drove a red car with the meat company's name on the side. "My father is a fireman," said seat number 2. "Ah, that's interesting," said Mrs. Frittag. Seat number 3. "My father's a lawyer." Seat number 4. "My father's a policeman." What was I going to say? Maybe only the fathers in my neighborhood were without jobs. I'd heard of the stock market crash. It meant something bad. Maybe the stock market only crashed in our neighborhood. Seat number 18. "My father's a movie actor." 19. "My father's a concert violinist." 20. "My father works in the circus." 21. "My father's a bus driver." 22. "My father sings in the opera." 23. 23, that was me. "My father's a dentist," I said. Mrs. Frittag went on through the class until she reached number 33. "My father doesn't have a job," said number 33. Shit, I thought. I wish I had thought of that. One day, Mrs. Frittag gave us an assignment. "Our distinguished president, President Herbert Hoover, is going to visit Los Angeles this Saturday to speak. I want all of you to go hear our president. I want you to write an essay about the experience and what you think of President Hoover's speech." Saturday? There's no way I could go. I had to mow the lawn. I had to go get the hairs. I could never get all the hairs. Almost every Saturday I got a beating with a razor strop because my father found a hair. I also got stropped during the week, once or twice, for other things I failed to do or didn't do right. There's no way I could tell my father that I had to go see President Hoover. So I didn't go. That Sunday I took some paper and sat down to write about how I'd seen the president. His open car, trailing flowing streamers, had entered the football stadium. One car full of Secret Service agents went ahead and 2 cars followed close behind. The agents were brave men with guns to protect our president. The crowd rose as the president's car entered the arena. There had never been anything like it before. It was the president. It was him. He waved. We cheered. Band played. Seagulls circled overhead as if they too knew it was the president. And there were skywriting airplanes too. There were words in the sky like, "Prosperity is just around the corner." The president stood up in his car. Just as he did, the clouds parted and the light from the sun fell across his face. It was almost as if God knew too. Then the car stopped and our great president, surrounded by Secret Service agents, walked to the speaker's platform. As he stood behind the microphone, a bird flew down from the sky and landed on the speaker's platform near him. The president waved to the bird and laughed, and we all laughed with them. Then he began to speak, and the people listened. I couldn't quite hear the speech because I was sitting too near a popcorn machine, which made a lot of noise popping the kernel. But I think I heard him say that the problems in Manchuria were not serious, that at home everything was going to be all right, we shouldn't worry. All we had to do was to believe in America. There would be enough jobs for everybody. There would be enough dentists with enough teeth to pull, enough fires, enough firemen to put them out. Mills and factories would open again. Our friends in South America would pay their debts. Soon we would all sleep peacefully, our stomachs and our hearts full. God and our great country would surround us with love and protect us from evil, from the socialists, awaken us from our national nightmare forever. The president listened to the applause, waved, then went back to his car and got in and was driven off, followed by carloads of Secret Service agents as the sun began to sink. The afternoon turning into evening, red and gold and wonderful. We had seen and heard President Herbert Hoover. I turned in my essay on Monday. On Tuesday, Mrs. Frittag faced the class. I've read all your essays about our distinguished president's visit to Los Angeles. I was there. Some of you, I noticed, could not attend for one reason or another. For those of you who could not attend, I would like to read this essay by Henry Chinaski. The class was terribly silent. I was the most unpopular member of the class by far. It was like a knife slicing through all their hearts. This is very creative, said Mrs. Freytag, and she began to read my essay. The words sounded good to me. Everybody was listening. My words filled the room from blackboard to blackboard. They hit the ceiling and bounced off. They covered Mrs. Freytag's shoe and piled up on the floor. Some of the prettiest girls in the class began to sneak glances at me. All the tough guys were pissed. Their essays had been worse shit. I drank in my words like a thirsty man. I even began to believe them. I saw Juan sitting there like I'd punched him in the face. I stretched out my legs and leaned back. All too soon it was over. Upon this grand note, Mrs. Freytag, said Mrs. Freytag, I hereby dismiss the class. They got up and began packing out. Not you, Henry, said Mrs. Freytag. I sat in my chair and Mrs. Freytag stood there looking at me. Then she said, Henry, were you there? I sat there trying to think of an answer. I couldn't. I said, no, I wasn't there. She smiled. That makes it all the more remarkable. Yes, ma'am. You can leave, Henry. I got up and walked out. I began my walk home. So that's what they wanted. Lies. Beautiful lies. That's what they needed. People were fools. It was going to be easy for me. I looked around. Juan and his buddy were not following me. Things were looking up.